Welcome back to Gold Shields, the show where you hear the best true crime stories straight from the mouths of the detectives that made the cases. We have an outstanding show for you today. I'm your co-host, Dan Murphy, along with Tom Smith, and together we have a combined 50-plus years experience with the NYPD, most of it carrying proudly the Gold Detective Shield. On today's interview, Tom will introduce somebody who is going to make you feel like you know his department and his area a little bit better, because it's a fascinating area that many TV shows, movies, and books have been written about. You're going to get the backstage pass today, which is what we always promise here on Gold Shields. Before we do that, though, we have to give a shout out to our sponsors who we love. MyPillow.com. You know, Mike Lindell has done an amazing job building a great company where everything is made right here in the USA, and they are a company that makes the finest bedding products you will ever sleep on. The MyPillow 2.0 product is the best pillow I have ever used, and I tell you that without hesitation or reservation. And you can buy one and get one free right now, in addition to very steep, as much as 80% discounts on all their amazing products, simply by using the promo code GOLDSHIELDS.
And one of our other partners that we're really proud of is Thin Blue Line USA. Thin Blue Line USA is a great organization that supports all the law enforcement communities in our country and the effects of a lost officer. And Thin Blue Line USA enabled us to help out in our own way and providing a promo code for everyone out there to use when purchasing Thin Blue Line USA merchandise. Everyone knows it. Their hoodies, their T-shirts, their bracelets, and most of all, their famous flag, which proudly is outside my house and others around this country. And actually, not to give it away, but our guest actually has a Thin Blue Line hoodie that he's wearing right now that we'll get to in a second. But
proudly.
Go on thinbluelinesUSA.com, use the promo code GOLDSHIELDS15 to get an amazing 15% off all your Thin Blue Line merchandise.
So, Tom, thanks for that. And before we introduce our guest, I just want to say, you and I have had a number of discussions already with our guest today, and he's one of those guys that full throttle, 100% everything he had, he gave to the job he had in the city he served. And he is the kind of guy we can't get off the phone with, because we could spend 4 hours on the phone with this guy and still have more to talk about. He's fascinating. He's been and done so many interesting things. I can't wait for you guys to hear these stories. I can't wait to hear them today. Tom, tell us who we have today.
So today we actually have our first member of the LAPD on our show, which we're really proud of, which we took a lot of thought and effort into who we were going to interview from the LAPD, which is a well-known worldwide police department. And today we have retired Detective Barry Telis and I posted this, and it's true, famous Robbery-Homicide Division.
Mm-hmm.
It's in TV shows, it's in movies, it's in the movie Heat, Lethal Weapon. Every LA police show, I think, references Robbery-Homicide Division.
Well, every high-profile case out there, right? Every very high-profile case in LA, the Robbery-Homicide Division handles. Period.
Absolutely. And we have Barry Telis today with us. And with no further ado, Barry, welcome to Gold Shields.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Very happy to be here.
So, Barry, tell us a little bit about what got you, where did you grow up, and what got you to the point where you joined the LAPD?
Well, I was born and raised in Southern California in a little town outside of LA called Monterey Park. And it's maybe about 3 or 4 miles outside of the LA city limits. And when I decided when I was about 13 or 14, I wanted to either be a cop, a fireman, or a cowboy, or an astronaut. And so the astronaut and cowboy thing was quickly discarded, since I wasn't smart enough to be an astronaut. So I decided, hey, police work's the thing for me. So early on, when I was a teenager, I got involved in the Explorer program, the Police Explorer program. Kind of introduces you to the profession. And I joined the Explorer program with the Los Angeles County Sheriffs, actually. And I thought went on ride-alongs, got to hang around the station, and just kind of basically they wanted us to do the grunt work, like cleaning the shotguns and putting rape kits together. Mm-hmm. But it was cool because I had never been exposed to anything like that before. So I decided, hey, I think this is probably what I want to do. So as I got older, I went to college, graduated high school, went to college. And when I was 20 and a half, I applied for the police department. I applied with two departments at the same time, LAPD and the LA County Sheriffs, and LAPD just called me first. So I get hired by LAPD. I go to the academy. I started in June of 1987. Little different time than it is now. Mm-hmm. But I joined the police department. I got into the academy. And boy, you talk about brainwashing you in the academy, telling you that LAPD is the biggest, the baddest, the bluest. It's the best police agency in the country. I know New York seems to think that they're the best in the country, but hey, we'll just agree to disagree on that one. And so I joined LAPD, and so I'm in my 13th week. They just gave us a badge, and we got to wear our badges, and that was pretty kind of cool. Especially the badges look like the old Dragnet and Adam 12 badges, which Adam 12 was one of the biggest recruiting tools for me, because I used to sit as a kid and just watch Adam 12 every episode, every line I knew. And I said, man, those guys are pretty badass. That's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. So I applied with the two agencies at the time. LAPD called me first. I went in with LAPD. And in week 13, the sheriffs called me and says, hey, we got a job for you with the sheriff's department. And I said, well, I think I'm just going to stick with LAPD. The brainwashing really worked well and really convinced me that they were the biggest, the baddest, and the bluest. So I stayed with LAPD for the next 33 and a half years. And I worked just about every assignment you can work on the police department in a uniform capacity, from patrol to training officer to what they call a senior lead officer. And then I decided, I'm getting a little older. My body's starting to break down a bit. Maybe it's time for me to do something else. So I decided there were two routes you could go. You can either go management, become a sergeant, lieutenant, captain, chief, commander. You can go that route, or you can go the investigative route. And that's the detective. We have 3 ranks of detective. So I decided to take the test, and I still wanted to put bad people in jail, and I still wanted to do actual police work. I didn't want to manage people. I didn't want to supervise people. I wanted to still be hands-on and still be able to put people in jail. Mm-hmm. So I took the test, passed it. I went to after I did 13 years in the field as a patrol officer. I got to a point where I couldn't really go any higher, so I became a detective, and there were 3 ranks of detective. And the 3 ranks that LAPD has of detectives are D1, D2, and D3. I think New York PD has something very similar. It's just opposite. Mm-hmm. So when you become a detective, you become what we call a D1. And a D1 is kind of your worker bees, your entry level, and you just work cases, and kind of I wanted to do more. Mm-hmm. So then I promoted to a D2, and a D2 is the same rank as what a sergeant would be. Now you're a detective supervisor. You're supervising a few detectives, and we have it broken down into different crimes. And I'm sure it's very similar to in New York. So we had domestic violence crimes. We had auto theft crimes. We had robbery crimes. We had sexual assault crimes, and we had homicide crimes. And so I first started out working domestic violence, boring as heck. There was really no whodunit or mystery on who victims report who the suspect is, and I found it not very challenging at all. Mm-hmm. So I switched over to the robbery section, and I started working robbery, and that was all whodunits, trying to put a case together, and I found that just fascinating. And it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. And I always tell patrol officers the difference between detectives and patrol is that patrol gets to put them in jail for 48 hours. We get to put them in jail for 48 years. Yeah. And that was a huge boost for me. Mm-hmm. And old time detective told me that, and I said, wow, that's pretty cool. That's what I want to do. So did the robbery thing for a little while at one of our LAPD is broken up into 22 different geographical divisions, what we call it. And I went to a division in pretty much in the heart of LA called Wilshire Division. And I did my being a brand new detective. I worked there. I worked sexual assault. I worked domestic violence, robbery. And then I started talking to the homicide guys, and I started learning about homicide. And then I actually went to the boss of the homicide section, who was a D3, and I was a D2 at the time. And I said, hey, his name was Tom Merle, one of the most brilliant homicide cops I've ever worked with. And I said to Tom, I said, hey, can I like come out to crime scenes with you and hang out? You don't even have to pay me. I'll just come out and I'll help you guys with your scenes. And I kind of want to learn how everything is done. So Tom says to me, he says, Barry, nobody's ever asked that before. Nobody ever said they want to come out to a scene and not get paid. So he went to the lieutenant, and the lieutenant says, hey, we want to take Barry Telis into our homicide unit. And I think he'll be a good fit. So a couple months later, I found myself, after doing 2 years in the robbery section, I found myself working Wilshire homicide.
Did you mention earlier about a test? I'm sorry, Barry. You mentioned about a test? There is a test to become a detective?
Yes, you do. You have to take, because it's a civil service rank. Okay. And in order to be a detective, you have to take a test, and it's a written test. It's an oral exam, and then you get ranked on a massive list, because LAPD has, almost 10,000 cops, and there's lots of people who everybody wants to promote. So what I did is I took the test, I passed it. I took the oral, I passed it, and since I had so much time on the job, the average detective makes detective after about 7 or 8 years. I had done 13 years in the field. And so I got what we call seniority points. Mm-hmm. And I was the highest rank you can be in the patrol rank as a senior lead officer. Mm-hmm. So I ranked pretty decent on the detective list. I made detective after about 7 or 8 months. And then I got assigned to Wilshire Division, where I first, that was my first detective assignment.
I didn't know that they had a test. I didn't know they had a test. In New York, it's not a test. It's a career path move. And it's not a civil service promotion. It's a designation. Your civil service rank is still police officer in New York.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, you leave it's still under civil service. Everything in our department under the rank of lieutenant and below is still considered civil service. And so I became a detective, and I kind of started kicking myself in the ass thinking, wow, I should have done this a lot sooner, because it was a lot of fun. And I loved working robbery, and I loved working homicide. And because this was the true detective stuff that every kid sees on TV, watching shows and watching the detectives, the old Joe Friday from Dragnet, putting a case together and getting a successful prosecution. And I dug it. I thought this was one of the best career moves I ever made, and I excelled in it. At least I thought I did. And I thought that, wow, this is my career path, and I think I'm just going to retire as a detective. I only had 13 years on, but I really enjoyed it, and I really found it challenging at times and a lot of fun. Interviewing.
Now, Barry, you had explained to us earlier, in multiple conversations we've had, how robbery homicide came into existence, which is a fascinating story, which I had no idea about, which everyone's going to know about. So take us through kind of a little brief history of Robbery Homicide Division.
Okay. Well, I worked a couple other divisions before that. I worked in our Wilshire Division. I worked in Hollywood Division as a detective supervisor at Detective Grade 3. And then I got picked to go to Robbery Homicide. And Robbery Homicide Division is a separate homicide unit than all the other divisions. And every division in the city has their own homicide unit. It's changed now, but there was always Robbery Homicide Division. And once I started working homicides, I said, that's where I want to end up. And Robbery Homicide Division was created. It was created back in 1968 when Robert Kennedy was murdered. He was murdered at the Ambassador Hotel by Sirhan Sirhan. And the case was, it's murder is a state charge case. It's not a federal case, regardless of who is murdered. So it became a state case, and now LAPD was under the spotlight. Mm-hmm. They have the murderer in custody and of the person who killed Robert Kennedy. Kind of a big deal, kind of a big thing for LAPD to embark upon. So the chief of police at the time decided that we needed to create a unit, almost like a task force, to handle just one case, the Robert Kennedy assassination. And they called it the Special Senator Section. And that unit was put together, was comprised of guys from our homicide division and guys from our robbery division. And they put the two of the guys together. And they had a team of, I think, 14 guys, 7 teams. And all they worked on was just the Robert Kennedy assassination. And it was, the Robert Kennedy assassination was a pretty simple case. It wasn't very complex. There was no whodunit. The Sirhan was captured at the scene. The murder weapon was in custody. And it was a pretty simple case. But LAPD chief of police said, okay, we're going to handle this case. We're going to put this task force together. And I don't want you guys to F it up. We want to shine. This is our chance to shine in the pretty much global spotlight. So they created the section. The prosecution of Sirhan was successful. And then the chief decided, we ought to create a unit that handles high-profile cases. Hey, it's Los Angeles. It's Hollywood. We have a lot of high-profile things throughout the years. The ones before it was Marilyn Monroe's death. And that's another example of a reason why they decided to put this unit together they called it the Special Senator Section. And then they said, well, you know what? That's we don't really have a senator. We're not going to investigate murders of just politicians. We want to handle cases that are specially assigned, that are high profile in nature, complex in nature. And we want to be able to put a unit together to make it to where a unit like this can step in and handle it, where the brass from the department doesn't have to worry a bit about it. Because it's guys who have experience. It's guys who have a lot of knowledge. And so they created this unit, and they put these guys from the homicide and robbery unit together to work together, and they created what we call a division. So they called it Homicide Robbery Division. So some deputy chief, somebody up way above my pay grade, said, that doesn't quite flow. So I think what we're going to call this, we should call it Robbery-Homicide Division, RHD for short. Mm-hmm. I like it. Let's do it. Mm-hmm. So hence the creation, 1969, they created the Robbery-Homicide Division. And so that's kind of how robbery-homicide came to fruition, was from the assassination.
Very interesting. It's usually a pivotal case or moment. And in New York, we talked about the Major Case Squad being formed after the Black Liberation Army assassinations of cops, a need to pull together expertise and specialization, and having that, not to put down anybody else, but having that team that can be laser-like focused on a very important case and having that level of skill. It's really something from a management perspective in the LAPD department. It makes a lot of sense. And New York is similar. So much that happens there is very high profile, and it's not just high profile in New York. You have global cases of global interest that happen, and you've got to do it right. So you're at Robbery-Homicide. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. The reason putting it together is because LAPD handles some of the most prolific cases that are out there. Mm-hmm. In the 1970s, we were like the serial capital of the country. We were handling the Hillside Strangler, the Skid Row Slasher, and we had probably 4 or 5 cases, serial killer cases going on at the same time. Mm-hmm. And it was confusing because what other police agency had separate serial killers going around killing multiple people at one time? And there's a very interesting movie out there called City of Angels, City of Death. And if you want to learn about robbery, homicide, and about what was going on in the 70s and 80s in Los Angeles, it's a great movie to illustrate it. But so the chief of police says, robbery homicide is an entity that is needed, especially in Los Angeles. And we're lucky we had the resources to be able to put something like that together, because you're policing a city with 4 million people in it, and you got to be able to take your resources and put them where they're needed.
Mm-hmm.
And because, just like all the managers do, which most managers in the police department have never been a detective in their life. And they're usually, they do a year in the field and they go inside and they spend their entire career inside kissing somebody's butt and getting into these positions. So they don't really have any idea of what the real world is all about. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have managers who understand that and sometimes you don't. But hey, mm-hmm. That's the police department for you.
Yep,
that's right. And you know what? You're so right with the description of robbery homicide and having the need to have that one unit, like Danny just said, to address high profile cases. And one comes to mind that we had discussed before, and that was the Christopher Dorner case, which I know robbery homicide, LAPD, and a host of other departments kind of ran at together. And there was a little power struggle a little bit with that case. But what I want you to do, Barry, is, it's a fascinating case, and I remember it, listening to it on the TV every night. And Christopher Dorner was a former LAPD cop, and Barry's going to get much more into it than me, but went on a rampage of murder around California. And take us through the case and what it entailed, and your guys' role with trying to help, trying to get in there, not getting in there, but getting in there. It was a really interesting synopsis of what happened with that case. So, Barry, tell us a little about that.
Okay, the Christopher Dorner case was very, very unique. It was a time that I've never seen in my whole 58 years being alive. But it was a very, very interesting case, violent. And Christopher Dorner was a LAPD officer who was terminated for misconduct. And he was terminated, and he definitely had a screw loose because he decided that it would be a good idea to start killing everybody who's responsible for him losing his job, which I can't even think about ever that happening anywhere in the country. So Christopher Dorner was a former military guy. He made himself sound, he did what we call a manifesto. Mm-hmm. And his manifesto spelled out everybody that he was going to kill. And it made him sound like he was this great intelligence officer and that he had the inside scoop to everything. But it turns out he was a guy that was in the Navy. He was an ensign in the Navy. And I believe his only job was to make sure the ships had a place to park. And that was the extent of his military background. Mm-hmm. But what he did is he went on a rampage and he decided to kill everybody that was involved in his termination from LAPD. So he wrote this manifesto, and the first two people he killed was in the city of Irvine, which is just outside. It's in Orange County, California, very conservative, very upper scale type neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And it turned out he was stalking his attorney's daughter and her fiance. And basically just walked up to him while they were getting into their car and executed both of them. No reason, just because they were part of his attorney. His attorney was a guy by the name of Randy Kwan, who's a great guy. And Randy Kwan tried to save Dorner's job, but the facts were that he was a screw up. He was not a very good police officer, and he was accused of some serious misconduct. So he was terminated for it. So Christopher Dorner decides, okay, I'm going to kill my attorney's daughter and her fiance. Did it in cold blood. Just basically walked up to them in a parking lot and executed both of them. Then he released, right after that murder, he released his manifesto. Mm-hmm. And boy, talk about the department going into a tailspin. I was currently at the Robbery Conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. And when we found out about this, and it was like all hands on deck. And the first question I asked is like, okay, what crime did he commit in the city of LA? And he said, none. He had not committed a single crime. We didn't have what we call a DR number. We didn't have a single reported crime in the city limits of Los Angeles. He kills Randy Kwan's daughter and her fiance in the city of Irvine. Different county, different city, different jurisdictions. And then he decided everybody and their mother was looking for him. So we decided to send police officers to all the targets that Christopher Dorner laid out in his manifesto. And Robbery-Homicide, one of our primary jobs was to do threat assessments on our employees, regardless of what jurisdictions it's in. We do threat assessments on our sworn police officers, and we have to make a determination how to protect them. So what we did, and now mind you, I was still in Las Vegas. I was packing up and I was coming back to LA for the Christopher Dorner case, which everybody that was from LAPD, from Robbery Homicide, did the same, because there was probably about 15 of us at the conference. So we all just left the conference early and came back to LA. So what we did is that right after the killing of of Randy's daughter and fiance, he went out to the city of Riverside. And now the city of Riverside, once again, outside of the city limits, outside of the county. And we were sending police officers to go sit on houses belonging to LAPD officers, kind of to provide security for these officers that were listed in the manifesto. And one of them happened to live out in the city of, I believe it was the city of Riverside or Corona, one of those. It's way east. It's about 50 miles east of downtown LA. So so Christopher Dorner's pictures all over the newspaper, nobody has newspapers anymore. Pictures all over the news that there's a massive manhunt. There's a reward for the arrest and capture of Christopher Dorner. Well, it just so happens 2 police officers from our Newton division, they come in to work. They said, okay, you're going out to Corona or Riverside and you're going to protect this one officer who lives out there. And so these 2 officers are like, okay, what's going on? Nobody really explained it to them. So they decide to drive out to Riverside, which is about an hour, maybe 45 minutes to an hour drive. And they pull into a gas station to get a cup of coffee, like every good cop does. So as they pull into the gas station, Christopher Dorner was filling up his car with gas almost at the same time.
Wow.
So an LAPD unit is in the city of Riverside getting a cup of coffee, and a tow truck driver flags them down and flags the officers down and says, hey, the guy you're looking for, that guy that's on the news that's killing people, he just left. He just pulled out like seconds before the officers pulled in. So our officers jump in their car and they get behind Christopher Dorner. Now they're outside the county. Radios don't work. 0 communications with anybody. They're following this guy who is a killer and who is on a rampage to kill lots and lots of people. And these 2 police officers have no communications with anybody else. They're trying to get on their cell phones and trying to call for backup. Horrible. We learned a lot from Christopher Dorner. We changed a lot of things after Christopher Dorner, but I'll talk about that later. Mm-hmm. And so they decide to continue following Christopher Dorner. And they can't get any backup. They can't get any help. They're on their own. Now, Christopher Dorner, military guy, probably had superior weapons. And all these cops had was a shotgun and a couple of pistols. And that's it. So they continue to follow Christopher Dorner. And they get off at a street called Magnolia off of the 15 freeway, which is in Riverside County. They get off, and it's a very big swooping off-ramp, big loop. Well, they see Christopher Dorner get off at Magnolia, do the big loop, and the cops are following. Our 2 officers from our Newton division are following them. Once they get into sight, Christopher Dorner had already dismounted from his car, had an AR-15, and just lights them up, just starts shooting at them. And these guys are taking fire, no backup, nobody to call. They are on their own. And Christopher Dorner, high-capacity magazines, AR-15s, military type of the weapons that we use now that are very common now that our patrol guys carry, but back then nobody had that. And he just unloads into their car. They pull over, try to take cover. One of the officers, I believe it was the driver officer, takes a .223 round, 5.56 round, right to the side of his head, and it kind of gave him a haircut. It just skinned right across his skull. And so the shooting stops, and Christopher Dorner takes off. He takes off going eastbound on Magnolia. The officers finally get help there from Corona PD. Corona PD shows up. They tell him what happened. This officer is shot, and he doesn't even realize that he had actually been clipped by this 5.56 round. And one of the officers at the scene says, "Hey, man, you're bleeding." And he was wearing a helmet. He was wearing a helmet with the bulletproof vest, but it went right below his right just to the left of his, I believe it was his left eye.
Wow.
And he ended up, you talk about lucky. A couple inches in the other direction, he would have been dead.
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Dorner drives off. The two officers are kind of in shock. They're like, "Wow, I can't believe this happened." Their car is riddled with bullet holes. He continues down the street, and now all of us, because since there's no communications, the officers in Riverside have no idea what happened. So Christopher Dorner pulls up to Magnolia, and I don't remember the street. Maybe it was Tyler. And it's a big intersection, 4 lanes on each direction, and a police unit, 2 Riverside cops, are just stopped at the light. Christopher Dorner is on the other side of the light going against them. They're going southbound. He's going northbound. They pull over. Christopher Dorner pulls right up to them and just unloads into their car with a rifle. Unloads. Kills one of them. The other one is shot, critically injured. He ends up surviving, but he ends up killing a Riverside cop. And so he continues on, and he leaves right after he does that. So he's out of control. He's out of control. This man needs to be stopped. This man needs to be put down, and he needs to stop this. And law enforcement is going bananas because nobody had ever seen anything like this ever. So, and it becomes a statewide manhunt for Christopher Dorner. So they track him, and they find his car up in the mountains. He had gone up to the mountains. His front axle breaks, and now he's on foot. So a massive gamut manhunt. Just hundreds and hundreds of officers descend on the mountains up in, it's called Big Bear, which is a mountain community. It was wintertime. It was freezing cold, and it was just so not the ideal conditions for a manhunt. And so now we have a crime in Riverside County, we have a crime in Orange County, and now we have Christopher Dorner, he's in San Bernardino County. LA County is nowhere in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Nowhere in the mix. The only nexus between Christopher Dorner and LA, the city of LA, is that he was a former police officer with us, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is he goes up into the mountains. He finds a cabin. Now, a lot of the cabins, I'm sure you guys have something very similar where cabins are pretty much vacant during the winter time, and then everybody goes up there in the summertime. So he breaks into a cabin only about maybe 3/4 of a mile from his car where he abandoned it. And there were so many rumors going around. Oh, my God, Christopher Dorner, oh, my God, he did this on purpose, and he's going to wait for all of us to gather, and then he's just going to start picking us off. Well, you can't plan having your axle break. So that was not part of his plan. Barricades himself into a cabin that's vacant, and he waits there. And this cabin is right where the command post is set up. I mean, it's like maybe a half a block away from where the command post, where every San Bernardino County sheriff had converged on this hill, on this manhunt. SWAT teams from San Bernardino County, SWAT teams from Riverside County, SWAT teams from investigators from Irvine PD, investigators from Riverside PD. Everybody, everywhere he left his little carnage, we had investigators, and we had probably 500 police officers on the hill in Big Bear to try to locate him. Well, they searched and searched and searched, and they couldn't find him. Unbeknownst to them, he's right there. He's in a vacant cabin, and he's right there. So what he did is he waited, and he's basically laying low to try to get away. So what happens is the people who own the cabin, this is about 3 days into it, 3 days after the killing of the Riverside police officers. So he barricades himself in this house. Nobody knows he's there. And the owners of the cabin come and say, and walk in, and Christopher Dorner's there. He ties them up, and he says, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to hurt them. And I'm taking your car. So he basically carjacks them, takes their car. They free themselves, and they call 911 and said, that guy you're looking for, Christopher Dorner, he just stole our car, and here's the description of our car, and he just headed that way. So what happens is they put that out. A park ranger from San Bernardino, I guess it's San Bernardino Park Police, a park ranger is driving by and basically does the Dorner's going one way, he's going the other way, and he passes him. He gets on the radio and says, I'm following Christopher Dorner. I'm following him on this road, this location, this direction. So now everybody, helicopters, everybody is converging on that. Christopher Dorner barricades himself into a house. There's a short vehicle pursuit. He jumps out of his car with his rifles, several, and he barricades himself in another vacant cabin. When San Bernardino sheriff deputies arrive and they start setting up, he lights them up, and he kills a San Bernardino sheriff deputy.
Wow!
Shoots him with the rifle, dead. And then from that point on, he became a barricaded suspect. The San Bernardino Sheriff's Department ended up lobbing tear gas into the place to try to smoke him out. And then about maybe a couple hours into it, you hear a single gunshot, and Christopher Dorner actually took his own life. He's a coward.
So he was fired from the LAPD 5 years before this incident. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
So what I've read
it takes
about,
a long time. It takes a long time to fire somebody in LAPD.
Same thing in New York. There was a process, yeah. But in his case, what I surmised by reading what I read about it, first of all, the LAPD has the preeminent threat management unit for a police agency in the world. Bob Martin, I had the chance to meet. If you know those guys that worked over there, I'm sure you know these names. Mm-hmm. They set the bar for how to, because of all the stalking and harassment and high-profile people and things that were happening in L.A., so they understood that very innately. His case brought up...
Jeff Dunn, you're probably talking about Jeff Dunn. Jeff Dunn was one of the creators of the LAPD Threat Management Unit.
Yeah.
TMU is what we called it for short.
Yep.
And the difference between... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say, when I was in the major case squad, one of the things that we were tasked with doing from the NYPD's perspective was doing staff assistance to other investigative agencies from anywhere in the world. And threat management unit every now and then would reach out to us with somebody that they needed something done in New York on, and I helped them with a couple of things. And I was very impressed with them. It was ahead of its time, but it had to be. It was reactive to what was necessary out there in California.
Yeah. Now let me tell you a little bit of the difference between what Threat Management Unit does and what Robbery-Homicide does.
Mm-hmm.
Threat Management Unit handles stalking cases for everybody other than police officers.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the police officers, and they're a very good unit. They're totally dialed in. They deal with the district attorneys all the time, and they handle your celebrity stalkers.
Right.
You know, the people who are stalking the celebrities. And so, but when it comes to sworn personnel agency within LAPD, that falls on the homicide section of Robbery-Homicide Division.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the difference, because everybody that he was threatening to kill were police officers, a couple of attorneys, and anybody who was involved in his case, he was threatening to handle it. And we ended up handling all the threat assessments, like 50 threat assessments. And we handled all the sworn police officers. So we did all the threat assessments, and we directed resources to the particular houses to basically protect them.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I've had death threats made against me when I was a cop, and it was in the middle of the night, get a call, you wake up, 2 detectives from the intelligence division are there with a portable radio and a charger telling you, carry this with you at all times. It's on Citywide 1. Use this code, whatever. And the local precinct, I was very lucky, sat a radio car, we call it squad, we call it radio car, with 2 cops in it 24/7 outside my house. And the lieutenant gave me his personal number at home and said, if they're ever not there for any reason, call me immediately. So I felt very protected. It was, they did a good job.
Yeah, we have something very similar to that. We have a unit called our Metropolitan Division. Have you ever heard of that? Metro.
Mm-hmm.
So Metropolitan Division is they have platoons that do crime prevention, extra patrol, and basically, if a division has a problem, they basically flood that division with uniformed cops. And then also part of the Metropolitan Division is our SWAT team. They call them D platoon, and the D platoon is the SWAT unit that goes out and for barricaded suspects, assistance of search warrants. Anytime that there's any kind of a risk factor, SWAT will handle the service of a search warrant. I used to use them all the time for my search warrants.
Oh yeah.
So what Metropolitan Division does is they provide security for officers who are being threatened. We call it's called an R100. And basically it provides security for the officer, their family, as long as we at Robbery Homicide say that this is a credible threat, and we can assign a platoon of Metro to basically guard their house, front and rear, and escort family members wherever they go. It kind of throws a monkey wrench into people's lives. Mm-hmm. And a lot of officers say, oh my God, I need an R100. I need to be protected. And it's like, okay, well, here's what it entails. Oh, they have to go to school with my kids. They have to go to soccer practice with my wife and kids. I said, yeah, we're protecting your entire family. Mm-hmm. And then most officers elect to say, I don't want to deal with that. I'll take my chances. Give me a shotgun and a radio and I'll be good. But our Metropolitan Division supplies if the threat assessment is deemed credible, they will do a R100 and protect the officers.
Wow. The one question I had, Barry, with regarding Christopher Dorner, the first 2 homicides happened, the daughter and the fiance. At what point does Christopher Dorner become the subject or the suspect? Is it when the manifesto is set up, or is everything kind of linked up and connected pretty quick that it's him? How does Dorner become the suspect in this whole array of murders that are going on?
You mean what we call it? When did Dorner hit the radar for being responsible for all this?
Absolutely.
But basically, what happened is after the murders of Randy's daughter and her fiance, he released the manifesto on the internet, and we found that really quick. And it was actually after the 2 Riverside cops were shot.
Okay.
And then it became the big manhunt. I mean, the LAPD's role in this. LAPD kind of has this attitude that we're the biggest, the baddest, and the bluest, and started to kind of take over the other smaller jurisdictions and tried to insert themselves in these investigations. Mm-hmm. Now, remember what I said. There was not a single crime in the city of Los Angeles. We didn't have a single DR number a crime report number, or anything that Christopher Dorner did in the city of LA. And we're LAPD. We just handle what happens in the city.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have the county, which handles the LA County sheriffs handle everything within the county, but within the city, we handle everything. But here we are, the second largest agency in the state of California, and really, we didn't really have a part in it. We didn't really have the only nexus we had to Christopher Dorner was that he was a former LAPD officer. That was it. So what we did is we set up a command post at our office. And the command post was where all the leads came in on where Christopher Dorner was. Because our mayor at the time, Antonio Villaraigosa, went on the news and says we're offering $1 million reward for the whereabouts and capture of Christopher Dorner. Well, we didn't have anything in place for something like that. We didn't have a place where all phone calls would be funneled into it. And, you know, of course, I come back from Las Vegas from the robbery conference, and they looked at me, my commanding officer looked at me and says, Barry, you're in charge of all the logistics to make sure that when people call, it comes to our office. And we probably had about 150 desks in our office. So I had to figure out, okay, how am I going to do that? So anyways, I ended up talking with our IT people and had all the phones routed for one particular number that was going to be called. And that number is going to come into our division, to Robbery-Homicide Division. And we were going to staff it with detectives from Robbery-Homicide to basically take the clues, take the information, pass it on to the tactical units, and says, okay, we just got a call. Christopher Dorner was seen at a Burger King at the corner of Walk and Don't Walk. Let's follow up on it. We had a massive amount of people involved in it. But like I said, not a single crime in the city of Los Angeles. But we're extending tons and tons of resources to this case because our chief of police felt that, you know, this guy's ours. This guy is one of our people. This guy is trained by us. This guy is our guy. We have to do something. We can't just sit back and let everybody else handle it. So that's where you get into a little bit of a power struggle, because we're talking 5 different agencies involved in this case. Mm-hmm. You have Irvine PD handling a double murder there. You have Riverside PD. 2 of their cops were one cop was killed and the other one was seriously injured. Then you have San Bernardino PD, San Bernardino sheriffs that have one of their officers killed. So it became a massive, massive power struggle. And one of the things that I distinctly remember is when Christopher Dorner was barricaded in that house, because it was a couple hour standoff before they decided to lob gas into it and try to gas him out and try to take him into custody. But I remember my commanding officer came to me, since I was the schmuck in charge of logistics. So he says to me, he goes, Barry, I need you to get 10 detective teams, and we're sending them up to the mountain. I said, 10 detective teams. What about all the people? He goes, shut down all the phones. Let's get investigative teams to help San Bernardino County. So I'm on the horn. I'm calling people in, trying to get. We called mobilization. We went 12 on, 12 off, and all days off, vacations, everything's canceled.
Right.
We were in mobilization. You had a day shift and a night shift, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Right.
And it was mass hysteria. I had never seen anything like this before, but I get tasked with trying to find 10 investigative teams, that's 20 detectives, and send them up into freezing cold weather, which, you know, I'm from Southern California. I'm not used to anything cold. If it gets below 60, I'm freezing cold and I'm miserable. So I have to get on the horn, and now, because it's day shift, I am calling the night shift guys. It says, okay, we need you guys to come to work bundled up because you're going up to the mountains. You're going up into Big Bear to assist the San Bernardino sheriffs with the investigation.
Wow.
So I'm on the horn. I'm calling everybody in. Everything's going good. And then my commanding officer walks over to me and says, Barry, stop. Stop. Don't call anybody in. What? What's going on? Why? Are we not helping out? We've just been told by the San Bernardino County Sheriff, we have all been ordered off of the hill. The people that we have up there now, the San Bernardino Sheriff said something to the effect, and I don't know exactly what it says, I'm sick and tired of LAPD sticking their nose in. This is not our first rodeo. I want every LAPD personnel off the hill. Oh, and it's like, whoa. All of a sudden, it just came to an end like that. We had probably 200 SWAT team members at an airport in San Bernardino County ready to be transported up. And the San Bernardino Sheriff had a conversation with our chief of police and says, you guys are sticking your nose in too much. Get off my hill. Now I got to call everybody and say, okay, and all the guys who were already up there, we had about 10 people already up there. And they were working for those 3 days trying to find out where Dorner was. I had to call them and I said, hey, man, I had to call one of my old partners. I said, hey, dude, you got to get off the hill. We've been ordered off the hill by the San Bernardino Sheriff. Everybody who works for LAPD off the hill. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? I'm not leaving. I'm staying up here. No, you've been ordered. Quasi-military organization. You've been ordered by the captain of Robbery-Homicide Division that all robbery-homicide personnel is not only not going up there, but all the existing personnel up there off the hill.
I hate to hear stories like that. You get people on the ground, the ground level, the cops, detectives, sergeants, lieutenants, folks that are actually running the operation, whatever that operation is on the street. Help is help. And when you need help, you take it. You got a large area to cover. You've got a lot of unknowns. You've got sworn police officer power, status, people on duty, trained, equipped. Why would you send them away? To me, that's a political
power
thing. Yeah.
You know exactly. That's exactly right, Tom. That's exactly what it was. It was LAPD has the tendency of telling people that they're all screwed up and that it's got to be done the LAPD way. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate, but it's just kind of the reality. It would be like some little police agency coming into NYPD saying, okay, we got this. We don't need your help. We got 30,000 officers to help you. Mm-hmm. That's basically what we did. We're the second largest. The LA County Sheriffs and the LAPD are the two largest agencies in California. Mm-hmm. And they supersede by thousands of officers from all these other agencies in California. So when our police department goes to the sheriff of San Bernardino County, which probably has about maybe 4,000 police officers, and says we're going to give you 500 SWAT officers, 500 trained SWAT officers, and for that sheriff to say, "I'm sorry, we thank you for your help, but we got it. We'll take care of it. In fact, I want you guys all off our hill." Something happened. Some type of communication happened between the chief of police, the assistant chief of police, the assistant chief of police, and the San Bernardino sheriff. Some type of conversation took place that, of course, it's way above my pay grade. But it created this animosity between the two agencies. And they said, we got it. We don't need your help.
Wow. That's wild.
Rodeo.
That's wild. And you know what? If we stayed on this long enough, it's not the first one. There's many more like that. And, Danny and I could come up with the same type of stories here, that took place, and it's power struggles. It's my ball, everyone go away type of attitude, which is unfortunate. But the bottom line and the good part is he's off this earth. He was eliminated, I think, by his own means, right? So no one had to worry about Christopher Dorner anymore, and that's the bottom line in this.
So we have
Christopher Dorner took his own life. He's just a picture of the definition of a coward. That's what he is. When you look up the word coward in the dictionary, Christopher Dorner's picture there. That's what he was. He was just a coward. Killing unarmed people, going after cops, sneaking up on them and going after cops, and just you're gonna shoot it out with the police, let's do it face to face here, so it's an
Right.
even playing field. But he was a coward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the other cases, a fascinating case, and thank you for the insight behind the scenes. But there's another case, perhaps arguably the most high-profile case in the history of the Los Angeles Police Department, had to be the OJ Simpson case. And rather than rehash the history of what happened at Rockingham and all those other places that became household terms back during the days of the original breaking of the story and the trial and all the other, there's been so much written and so much said about it. And you were not directly involved at the time in it. You were not in robbery homicide yet. But during a period of time when you were still with robbery homicide, still with the LAPD, you were assigned as part of a follow-up because the case is still technically considered open, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
And you're exactly right. What happened with the OJ Simpson case? It happened in 1994. I was a patrol guy. I was on loan to narcotics, and basically, the only thing I knew about the OJ Simpson case was what the news portrayed. I didn't know anything about it. I was not part of robbery homicide. But as years go on, it's still one of the most famous or infamous murder cases in LA, the city of LA's history.
Sure.
So I'm working robbery homicide. I'm sitting at my desk after hours, and I am, doing what any good detective does, is shopping online. And my captain comes out of his office, and I'm the only schmuck that's still sitting at my desk, 7:00 at night. And he comes over to me and he says, "Hey Barry, what do you got going on?" And I said, "Oh my God, those are the kiss of death words. I don't want to hear that. What do you got going on? Because you're going to hand me a pile of crap."
Yep.
And he goes and he hands me a business card and says, "Here's call this guy. He says he's in possession of the OJ Simpson murder investigation. He's in possession of the murder weapon."
Okay.
And what I did is I did what any good homicide cop would do: roll his eyes and say, "Okay, this guy does not have the murder weapon. I'm telling you right now, he does not have the murder weapon." And he goes, "I know, but we got to follow up on it." And I said, "Okay, I'll handle it." So the next day, I call the guy, and he is a retired motor cop from LAPD. He retired in 1997, and he was working kind of a moonlighting job, which is what a lot of motor cops do. Is they work, this is LA, this is Hollywood. They always need security for their shooting scenes. So commercials, movies, TV, anything involving the Hollywood industry. Our retired motorcycle cops still work and provide security. So this particular motor cop, and I don't want to mention his name, but he is he's an idiot. And what he does is he's working a movie job, a commercial they're shooting right outside the Rockingham estate. This is in 2002. And in 2002, they're tearing down the Rockingham estates. It's 2002 or 2003, somewhere in that area. And he's sitting on his motorcycle doing what motor cops do, which is pretty much nothing, and providing security for this scene and for this production. And the construction workers are tearing down the Rockingham estate. They leveled it. They tore everything down from the retaining wall to the house, everything. And it was just a big vacant lot that's worth probably millions and millions of dollars, because it's in a part of town called Brentwood. So they come over to him and say, "Hey, look, officer, we found this knife buried right by the retaining wall. And hey, this could be the murder weapon." So he collects the knife. This is evidence in a murder case. He collects it in 2002. He holds on to it, and he decides to tell somebody about it 12 years later. So he runs into a couple of our detectives who just happened to be at our academy gun store buying police equipment. And this guy walks up to them and says, "Hey, do you guys work robbery homicide by any chance?" He goes, yeah, we do. Actually, we do. And he goes, okay, well, I have the OJ Simpson murder weapon, and I wanted to get an evidence tag for it. And these two guys they're working our robbery section. And these two guys are just looking at this guy like, are you kidding me? You have the OJ Simpson, the murder weapon that OJ Simpson used to butcher these two people. Mm-hmm. You have that? He goes, yeah, I do. And I want to get an evidence tag and write can you get me the DR number so I can write it on an evidence tag? And I want to frame it because, I want my kids to be able to sell it and make some money after I die. So these two detectives from Robbery-Homicide take his information, go back to the commanding officer of Robbery-Homicide, and say, hey, Captain, we talked to this guy, and he says he has the murder weapon from the O.J. Simpson case, hence my involvement. And so he goes to the homicide section, and there I am sitting at my computer. Call this guy and find out what the heck this guy's talking about. So I did. I called the guy the next day. I said, I understand you may have some evidence in a murder case, an unsolved murder case, because once somebody is acquitted, the case reverts back to being open. And that's just a procedural thing that LAPD has.
Okay.
So I understand you have some evidence in a murder case that I'm going to need to get from you. So I'm thinking he's going to say, yeah, I do. I have this, and going to tell me all the circumstances. You know what he says to me? He says, yeah, I have it, but I'm not giving it to you. I said, well, what do you mean you're not going to give it to me? It's evidence in a murder case, dude. You have to give it to me. You have to turn it over. So now I'm thinking, oh, man, I got to write a search warrant for this dude's house, and I have to freaking take every single knife in his house. I mean, how many knives do we have in our house?
Yeah.
And I have to search his entire house because this guy's not going to give it to me. And I said, I'll tell you what. Why don't you give me the knife? I'll have it tested for DNA, for wound patterns. I will have it tested. And if it's not the knife, I will give it back to you. How does that sound? And he goes, well, Detective, do you promise me that you'll give it back to me? You promise me that you'll give it back if it's not the knife, if you guys aren't going to keep it? And I said to him simply, I promise, stick a needle in my eye if I don't give it back to you. I promise you, I'll give it back to you. Hope to die, stick a needle in my eye.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay, you can come get it. So my partner and I drive out to an area called Canyon Country, which is, it's about 40, 50 miles from kind of northwest of the city. A lot of cops live there in those neighborhoods. And, we come walking up, and he's standing there holding the knife, and he's going to hand it to me. Just give it to me. I said, dude, put the knife down. I put a mask on. I put gloves on, and I collect it, and I bag it up as evidence. I take a swab from him because we got to eliminate him because his DNA is obviously going to be on the knife. Mm-hmm. And then we ask him, how did he get it? How did he obtain this knife? And he tells a little different story than the first two detectives that he approached at the Academy store. He says that he's sitting on his motorcycle. The construction workers came over to him, directed him to where the knife was buried in the ground, and that he collected it. And I said, well, didn't you tell the officers that the construction guys gave it to you? Or, and I started analyzing what he was saying, and I knew he wasn't telling me the truth. And so I said, okay, wait a minute. Okay, so that's how it happened. So I write up his statement. I get this detectives who actually gave it to. Big difference, kind of a minor detail that he forgot to leave out. And so I had the knife tested. I had the knife tested for DNA. The only DNA on that knife was his. I had the knife tested for wound patterns and to match it up to the wounds from Ron Goldman and Nicole Simpson. And I had them compared through the LA County Coroner's Office. And the LA County Coroner's Office Trace Evidence Unit, which is very good, they're like one of the best in the country. They said that every single knife wound from this knife this particular knife that I'm handing them is inconsistent with every single wound from the murder. So now the knife doesn't match the wounds. The knife DNA, the only DNA on it is from our motor cop. And okay, the conclusion is that this is not the knife. There was only one wound that was inconclusive, and that was a slash wound on Ron Goldman's thigh. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I basically closed it out, booked it in as evidence, and we're waiting for the next knife to appear. So that was my very, very small involvement in that particular case. And then somebody from, I don't know if it was our office or the lab. I don't think it was the lab, but somebody from our office leaked that information to TMZ. And TMZ all of a sudden broke it, that they had a picture of the knife, which wasn't the knife, and that LAPD's in possession of the murder weapon from the OJ Simpson murder, and the Nicole Brown, Ron Goldman murder.
Wonderful.
So I'm once again, I'm in Las Vegas again for the California Homicide Conference, which I was vice president of. And I'm driving back to LA, and I get a call from my boss, from my lieutenant, and from the commander of Detective Bureau. Mm-hmm. And they knew nothing about this knife. They didn't know anything about this knife because my commanding officer said, "Don't tell anybody about this knife. I will brief the deputy chief." And I said, "Okay, well, that's your job. Your management. You tell whoever you want, but this is what I'm going to do." And then so it was like about a month and a half later, I get the phone call from the commander, who the deputy chief did not share the information with. And Barry, what is going on with this knife? I'm getting my phone, my phone, media relations phone is blowing up, and we know nothing about this knife. And I said, "Well, I told the captain about it, and he told the deputy chief about it." And he goes, "Oh, I'm just the commander. Nobody told me about it." And he starts laughing. Great guy, one of my favorite command staff officers. Mm-hmm. He just starts laughing. He goes, "Wow, I guess nobody wants to tell the commander what's going on." The deputy chief and the captain are both on vacation. Come on, Kevin. It always works out that way.
This highlights a bunch of interesting things. First is it's funny when you're a detective or even a supervisor detective, there's so many people that want to know. And then there's people that you wouldn't think feel they need to know or want to know and can get upset at you for not telling them this, that, or the other thing. And it doesn't even matter that it's inconsequential. It's like, well, I should have known, So it's very hard to know who to tell what to. But another point that this brings out is in a place like LA, in a case like that, and I've worked on reasonably high profile, local, regional, but never anything, the global scope of that, the wingnuts come out of the closet. You get every nut in the world wants to attach himself to that case. Now, I'm not saying this cop was a nut. He certainly wasn't the brightest knife in the chandelier, as they say, but he wanted to be a part of this. He saw dollar signs or something in it, and they want to get in touch with you. He's desperately hoping it's the murder weapon so that somehow he can say he's got the evidence tag. I found the murder weapon. They do come out of the woodwork. It's part and parcel to high profile cases.
You know what's funny about that? It's an interesting point that you bring up, that when I started talking to this guy and he had the knife, it was appalling to me that he was trying to make money off of the death of two people. Mm-hmm. That is just appalling. From being a police officer, as long as he was, to think that I'm going to sell it and make money. And these two people were murdered, brutally murdered. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's any mystery as who did this. Just looking when I got involved in the case, I started looking at all the evidence, and the evidence was pretty clear on who the perpetrator and who the killer was. It wasn't a big mystery. No. But I had a job to do, and I had to make sure that we explore all avenues.
Nope, understood.
So you're right.
To anybody who's ever worked any kind of investigation that requires gathering of a fair amount of blood evidence, etc., this case, what lay people like us, I haven't seen the case files, But the testimony I heard, the things I saw, this was one of the clearest cases that a conviction was warranted for I've ever heard of. Absent video and several corroborating eyewitness testimonies, you had a rock solid forensic case. Everything about it pointed to guilt, and so I don't, it's juries do what they do for whatever reason, right? But
I didn't follow the case because I really didn't have a lot of interest in it. I was working patrol. I had, started a new family. I really didn't care. It really wasn't my focus at the time of the murder happened. I was young. I mean, it happened in 94. I was still semi-new to the police department, and I was just trying to figure out if I was doing the right thing in whatever I was doing. I didn't really pay much attention to the case when it happened. Yeah, I know it got a lot of media attention because we were just coming off of the big case we had with Rodney King. And Rodney King, I'm sure you guys are aware of the Rodney King beating. Yeah. One of my academy classmates was one of the main officers involved in that. And we were just coming off of that. And I was like, okay, that's something that makes us look bad. And I didn't want to continue and contribute to anything. I just wanted to do my job and do my thing. And I was a happy, dumb patrol cop, and I loved doing what I was doing. So I didn't really pay much attention to it. I never thought ever that 20 years later, I'm going to be sitting in the office of Robbery-Homicide, and that case is going to be dropped in my lap. I had to learn about it. I didn't know anything about it. All I knew was what I saw on TV. And usually when it was on TV, I just changed the channel and watched Adam 12 instead. And, it wasn't something that I really had a whole lot of interest in. And then when I became what they call the keeper of the case, then I said, okay, I better learn about this stuff. And I don't want to look like an idiot when they ask me questions about it. So.
Well, you know what, Barry? LA is definitely full of its drama. That's for sure, with the Hollywood aspect, the media aspect, and the high profile cases that come out of LA. And you happen to be involved in two very high profile cases that you explained to us today. And it's an incredible, testament to your work and LAPD's. I'm all for, the biggest department getting involved in little things. If you have the resources to help out, you help. And that's the bottom line. We should all be on one team with one mission. And sometimes that gets thrown off track by people of a higher power and in it for a different reason. But you were certainly involved in two very high profile cases. And thank you for explaining both of them in such detail to us and to the audience. It was a great show. Thank you.
And I can tell just by our conversations with Barry, there's a lot more that we could talk about with him that would be riveting, compelling casework that just isn't as high profile as the ones we mentioned now. And maybe we'll have you back. We'd love to do that if you're ever open for it, because 33 years in the LAPD and all those years in robbery homicide, you've got to have some, including there might be some cold cases that you might want to share with the audience, and we'd love to do that here. Send out challenges to the audience and say, hey, we're going to have a detective come on. He or she's going to talk about a case that still haunts them, a case that they want to see closed, because we all know that years later, as detectives, we talk about this. You remember intimate details of your cases from 25 years ago, from 30 years ago, because you lived with them and you really put everything you have into them. So thank you today. Go ahead, please.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. For some reason, I can remember little details about stuff like this. I just can't remember what my kids' names are. I can never find my damn car keys. So I don't know why. And one of my bosses said, "Man, Barry, how do you remember all this shit?" And I said, "Well, I can't remember my kids' names, but I can remember this. I don't know why."
Your tank is filled with case information, right? So, one question. And whenever somebody's retired who gave as much as you did to what you did, and it became your identity and all that other stuff, do you miss it, Barry?
Well, I do miss it. But best way for me to describe that. I miss the clowns. I don't miss the circus.
Ah. Well said.
Well said.
Yeah. Well, we can't thank you enough, Barry, for your time today. We know our audience is going to love this episode. We would love to have you back at some point, talk about some other stuff, because you just are a wealth of information about a period of time in LA where a lot of high profile, a lot of fascinating things happen, a lot of societal changes, cultural changes. The emergence of gangs became much more, you dealt with a lot of stuff. So we look forward to that at some point in the future.
Yeah, anytime. It was a joy being on with you guys. I enjoyed it. I still like, even though I've been retired for a couple of years now, I still like talking about investigations.
Of course. Yeah, it becomes who you are, right, Tom?
Absolutely. And it's great to sit down in a setting like this and just go over cases that, you hear about, like it's on the other side of the country. It's a different department. You hear about it, but to get the like we do on the show, the backstage pass to these investigations and what's done is eye-opening, and it's great that we have this platform to do it. And like Dan just said, we can't thank you enough for your time, for your career, and your dedication. We love it, and we'll certainly have you back because I'm sure in the world of Los Angeles, there's many more stories we could throw around for an hour.
Yeah, and Barry's made his promise the next time we're in Las Vegas we're going to take him to a nice steakhouse, one specific one he likes, as opposed to the McDonald's International Steakhouse, which is what my budget usually allows for me to eat at.
I'm definitely going to hold you guys to that.
Okay.
You got it. That's a deal.
We can do that. We have some great supporters of the show, and we're gaining more all the time. Organizations we like to be affiliated with. We want to mention some of those today before we go out the door, and I'll let Tom do that. But we want to thank all our listeners for jumping on board, for showing an interest, for your communications with us. TheGoldShieldShow.com is our website. Contact us. Let us know your feedback on the shows. Let us know ideas you might have, because we are a listener-driven podcast. And Tom, tell us about some of the folks we've been talking to who we believe in their mission and we think they align with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, Dave, thanks. And one is really important that we got together with in the last couple of weeks. And that's the Southeastern Homicide Investigators Association. They're a great collection of top-level investigators in the world of criminal investigations. And they have a conference every year that they get briefed and ask for their assistance with, open cases throughout the country. And Jen Spears, who's the president of the association and is currently a special agent with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, has a array of investigators that are unbelievable, from detectives to state troopers, coroner investigators, special agents from NCIS, and so many more. So I ask everyone to go on their website. It's SEHI.org. And you can register for their conference, which is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania this year from November 6th to November 10th. Great opportunity to run your case by them, see what help they can give you, some assistance they can give you. A great, great organization. So we want to get that out for them. The other is Dave Bray USA. Dave is a amazing national recording artist who was on the show, and his backing of law enforcement in the military is next to nobody. He's at events and does shows for law enforcement in the military, and we just want to always get every word we can out about Dave. And he just posted on his website recently, DaveBrayUSA.com, a list of concerts and events he has coming up. So please go check that out on DaveBrayUSA.com. You can check his music out, his videos out, and definitely his tour dates. So we wanted to get that out for Dave. Great supporter of the show and a great patriot.
Yep. And, there's a lot of folks whose heart is in the right place, but they might not have quite the talent. Dave Bray has both. He is a tremendously talented singer, songwriter, musician. His band is phenomenal. And he just has a new single, I believe, called Valhalla that has been streaming online in video form. I saw it on LinkedIn. Tremendous. The man's he's great. He's a friend of the show. We love him. So, Tom, take us out the door as usual. Barry, thank you again. We hope to see you soon.
Great being here. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you. And like we always do every year, end up thanking everyone out there for their prayers and their continued support of the men and women in law enforcement in uniform. And make sure you go on our website, thegoldshieldshow.com, for some of our new partners that we got. One in particular is the Wounded Blue. That posting is going to be up on our website about that organization. We're going to have many more, much more to say about them. So keep them in your prayers. Keep the organizations that back us in your prayers, and make sure these men and women get the support that they need during their careers and even after their careers. So thank you for all of that. And thank you for tuning in this week. And thanks to Barry again and Dan. We'll see you soon. And everyone out there, please stay safe.